Hello everyone, welcome to the stream. How's everyone doing today? Tonight? This evening? Gonna be doing something a little different today. Kind of like a one-man podcast, I suppose. This past Saturday and this Saturday again, we are doing Mind Games, which is video games that deal in some way relate to mental health. But this time, it's just going to be a discussion. We're going to be talking about depression in particular this week. Next week, we're going to be talking about anxiety. And then I think the week after that, we'll do panic attacks. If we don't cover that in anxiety, I haven't fully formed exactly what any one past this one's going to look like, but this one's going to be in particular about depression. So, what I'm going to cover today is I'm going to cover my journey with depression a little bit. I have had depression a few times during my life. I currently have depression and have had it for about the past year, I would say. It sort of built in intensity, built to being major depressive. But it's recently been back on the upswing. So we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about what does depression feel like what is it in a clinical sense, but also just kind of what it feels like and what it kind of can turn your life into. And again, this is all from my perspective of dealing with it for the most part. Also, I'll be talking about stuff from Claire Week's Hope and Help for Your Nerves, which is a fantastic book. It is mainly about anxiety and panic disorder, but it also covers depression. There's some very good stuff in there. So it's sort of a mix between my experiences, some of my ideas of things that have worked for me, and then some things that she talks about and recommends for today. So we have what does depression feel like? We're going to talk about what causes depression, what can cause depression. We're going to talk about treatments. And then we're going to talk about what can I do for someone else who is suffering for depression. And then after that, I'll get to questions and any other additional discussions that come out of those. If you want to ask questions before then, that's fine. I might get into them as I go along, but I also might save them towards the end to not break up the flow too much. We'll see how it goes. But if you have them, feel free to ask them. If you want to make sure that I see them on Twitch, down below there's a bubble for ask a question that goes into a separate queue, so I can make sure it doesn't get lost. But I'll be scrolling back up to the chats as well, just as long as my computer doesn't crash on me again, like it did on Saturday. But before I get started, I do want to mention that it is Mental Health Awareness Month, which is one of the reasons I'm doing this stream. I'll give you the book. There you go. We are raising money for Vibrant Emotional Health, which, among other things, they provide the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, which is a service in the United States. You can call 988 on your phone. You can text it. They also have a website for chatting, and it's a crisis lifeline. Crisis intervention specialists will talk to you and help you through whatever your crisis happens to be. They have special lines for LGBTQ plus people. They have special lines for veterans. It will connect you to someone locally, and you can talk through what's going on. It's a very important service. We're very happy to be raising money for it, and I will be shouting out those donations as we go along. We are currently at $410 raised, but we're trying to raise $5,000 today. Not today, this month. Today would be awesome, but the goal is for this month. We have some other streams going on, obviously. We have Eric playing God of War. I believe this Friday, are playing Jackbox. I'm pretty sure that's happening this Friday, so that's going to be fun. And towards the end of the month, there's going to be a special rock band stream, which will be sort of like a jukebox sort of thing where you can make donations in order to get us to play songs. Thank you, Jake. Yes, Jackbox is Friday. I thought it was, but never sure. Made a terrible mistake on my drinking vessel. I'm going to spill on myself many times tonight, but you can only see up here, so it won't be too embarrassing. Okay. Appreciate everyone coming for the stream, and let's get started. Okay, so we'll start off sort of with what depression is and what depression feels like. So I like to imagine it like this. I imagine myself as a battery. A solar battery, I think, is most apt. We'll talk a little bit about why later. But I imagine myself as a battery hanging over this dark abyss. And I'm hanging via these wires that are running to me. And these wires are connections. And they're connected to things like people, but they're also connected to activities like work or hobbies. And the connections run both ways. And through those connections, I can either gain energy or I can lose energy. I can expend it into those things. And so what depression is, for me, is when that battery gets to a certain low point for a period of time. Because it'll fluctuate as we're just sort of going through our lives. The things that cost this energy from the battery are emotions and experiences or stressors. And like I said, it can either go out of you or it can come into you and recharge you. And depression I see as a drained battery. The good news is, and the thing that I want to stress the most about this stream, is that batteries can be refilled. There is hope when it comes to depression. Like I said, this is not my first time having depression. I've had depression before and I have recovered. I'll talk about that more later on. But it is something that is recoverable from. So that is, I think, the most important thing to keep in mind as we're discussing depression today. And so what happens as the battery drains is it's not as good of taking in those connections as it was. And so those wires begin to heat up and they begin to break. And I find that I have little to no control over which of those wires break. But the lower my battery is and the more the more draining emotions that I'm taking on that are draining that energy from me, is causing those connections to snap. And so when it snaps to a particular hobby, or maybe all of your hobbies, you just lose interest in doing those things. And eventually it starts snapping it to people. And the reason for that could be a lot of different things. You can feel like you don't want to be a burden to certain people. So you sort of separate yourself from them. And as those continue to snap and snap and snap, eventually it snaps so that you are falling into that dark abyss. And at that point is when things really, truly feel hopeless. And even as wires reach down to you, as people are trying to extend their connections back to you, because you're in so much pain, because you don't want to be a burden to other people, you shun those connections because you don't want to drain those people like you yourself were drained. And so that's where major depression comes in. It's kind of how I see it. Now, the good news is, like I said, a battery drained can be recharged. And it's not easy, like I said. So I would say I started sort of my downhill slide into depression last January. So January 2023. It's currently May 2024 if you're watching this later. And that was sort of a steady decline. A lot of anxiety and negative emotions when it came to traveling to London for me, which was a very big deal. And once I was there, some other things happened. And a big cause of depression for me. So there's the costly emotions. I think the most costly emotions are fear and despair. And as someone with anxiety, so I never just get depression on its own. It always comes as part of my anxiety or as part of my panic disorder. Like once I've drained myself enough with the fear, then the depression tends to set in. And despair also, I think, is a very costly emotion that feeds back into depression. So depression, you'll get to the point where you are feeling despair, and that despair further fuels the depression. And then another big cause for me for depression is feeling like I'm not meeting expectations. And those could be my own expectations, or those can be other people's expectations. That seems to be, I think, a very big trigger for me. And I'll talk about what you can do for people who are experiencing depression in order to help them out with that sect of it in particular, I think. So as far as the clinical side of depression goes, let's just talk about a few of these real quick here. Now, obviously, you can feel these things and not be depressed. Depression occurs when you are experiencing these symptoms and it is beginning to affect your daily life. And how much it is affecting it is how minor or major your depression is. So feeling of sadness, tearfulness, emptiness, and hopelessness, like I talked about despair before. So I will find I notice that I am starting to be depressed when I find myself just randomly, seemingly becoming sad, having a tearful episode where I just am sort of overwhelmed by those emotions. And a lot of it is a feeling of loneliness, even when I'm with and among other people. So in a previous episode of depression, I had that before at work, being in the back setting up the podcast one day where people were in the building, but I was back there alone and just sort of started crying to myself. And that was a sign to me that I was going through depression again. Another symptom can be angry outbursts, irritability or frustration, even over small matters. This one I don't really suffer from quite so much, but I find depression is a kind of pain, and we tend to lash out when we are in pain. So I kind of see it like that. We're in an emotional pain, and therefore we can lash out. Loss of interest or pleasure in normal activities such as sex, hobbies, or sports. So I talked about those connections being broken before, where you're just no longer interested in those sort of things. And I'll talk about how we can rekindle some of that when I talk about treatment a little bit later. But I think part of this is you are just in your own head so much of the time when you're depressed, and you are engulfed in those negative feelings and emotions that there isn't really room for anything else. There isn't room for that desire for sexual activity or for that desire to engage in your hobbies that once gave you joy, because you feel like you're suffering, and you can feel like, because you're feeling it and these things aren't giving you happy, you somehow deserve this suffering. And it's just something that you need to go through in order for it to get better. Like I've had those sort of feelings before. Sleep disturbances, including insomnia or sleeping too much. So that's a tough one. Obviously, everything is much more difficult when you are having trouble sleeping. I think that talking to your doctor when you're having trouble sleeping, and at least maybe temporarily getting on some sleeping medication, in order to get that back, because if you're not sleeping, it's tough to recover. Now, you can still recover while not having sleep. This is something that Claire Weeks talks about in her book, which, do I still have it up? I do. Good. So this idea that if you're anxious or depressed, or for whatever reason, you find your mind is racing and you can't fall asleep, by sort of laying there and accepting the fact that you are not sleeping and just trying to lay there as relaxed as you can, trying to listen to something afar, you're still recovering in that state, even if it's not as much as you would recover from sleeping. Tiredness, lack of energy. Again, this can come from the sleeplessness, but not necessarily either. Like I said, we're a battery, and when our emotions are drained, energy and physicalness gets drained as well. Reduced appetite or increased cravings for food. So normally, if I get reduced appetite while being depressed, it's more because of the anxiety messing with my stomach. If it's just the depression on its own, I tend to crave food more. And the reason for that is I'm looking for any sort of like endorphin rush or anything that gave me an endorphin rush before. And food can be one of those things, like sweet food or something like that. And so I can find myself trying to find solace in that food. And because I'm eating unhealthier, I'm feeling worse. And I'm feeling worse about myself, and that also feeds into the depression. So that's another one of those things that can be like a snowball that's rolling down the hill, just gathering up momentum. It can increase anxiety, agitation, and restlessness. For me, I think it's usually the other way around, but they do sort of feed into each other. We'll be talking more about anxiety in detail next week. Slowed thinking, speaking, or body movements. This one happens especially for me because I am autistic, and part of autistic meltdowns and shutdowns is the loss of function, and that can be losing or slowing the ability to speak. It feels like your brain and your body is slowed down, just like it's like Goku's weighted vest, where everything just takes so much more effort. Getting out of bed is almost impossible. We'll talk about the getting out of bed problem a little more when we get to treatment. Feeling of worthlessness and guilt, fixating on past failures or self-blame. This is another one of those feeding into itself sort of things, where I have a feeling of worthlessness, and I have a feeling of guilt because I feel like that because I am suffering, I am causing suffering in those around me. And I don't want to do that. And so I might sever those connections and try to deal with it myself, which I don't think is the correct thing to do. And it can get to the point where it's very, very bad. I am going to read a message that I sent to the guys. See if I can find it here. Luckily, it was a little while ago. So I talked about sort of my journey to depression. I'll get back to that real quick. So I'd say January of last year, it started getting steadily worse until April in London, and then it got significantly worse until it reached, I don't want to say a zenith, but it reached that major depressive level August 10th, which is the day before my birthday. And it was like I had been suffering for a while. There were it was a lot of mental pain, but also physical pain as well. One of the things on depression is unexplained physical problems such as back pain or headaches. So anxiety can do that as well. And I was having so much pain in my back. I was having so much pain in my head that it was feeling like I didn't want to go on anymore. and I felt like I was more. I felt like I was hurt, like I was hurting, and I was hurting the people around me by hurting. And so, like around August time, I started considering suicide. And I like considering it as an option. Like once you get majorly depressed, death and suicide can be something that just kind of comes into your head. And it can start as intrusive thoughts, which are thoughts that we don't really mean. They just sort of pop into your head. And when you despair from them or when you're afraid of them, they can become more etched into your mind. And it can sort of eat away at you. And then it can become something that you think that you want. Yeah, like in chat says, like a passive inevitability sort of thing. So it was around August time that was happening for me. And, I wasn't planning on how to attempt suicide, but I was looking at things to make sure that, my family would be okay afterwards. Like what's the life insurance situation? What's the situation for Blind Wave? What happens in that event kind of thing. And I felt like it felt like a very tough thing to talk about to people, because I felt like at the time, if you tell that to someone, then even if it were true, the fact that you were a burden and you would, like, that person would be better off if you were dead than alive, that is something no one would ever say, right? So I didn't think I could trust people if I told them that thing. Now, I obviously did talk to people about it. I talked to Maggie, and I also talked to my therapist. If you feel like you need to talk to someone, if you're in the United States, there is that 988 crisis helpline, which, that is a great situation for that. I saw on the site somewhere, it said if you even think you should call, then you should call. So that's one of the reasons that we're raising money for that cause. And if you have given, I will get to those donations after this. Let's see. So where was I? Oh, yeah. So here's kind of where I was in October, which I had it up, but it closed on me, so I have to find it again. Here we go. I'm feeling especially depressed today. This was September 28th, so I had been starting to get more depressed from January that year. This is 9 months in. I'm feeling especially depressed today. I could use some help. I know a lot of these statements below are irrational, but I think it might help if I could get some reassurance. I feel like a failure, like I'm letting everyone down. I'm a burden, and everyone would be better off without me. I feel like people are angry or upset that I'm not working hard enough or pulling my own weight. I feel worthless, like I can't even exist through today, let alone accomplish anything. Want to talk to you guys about how I'm doing, but I don't know how. Being in the office is hard, but not being able to talk to you guys is harder. Miss talking with you. I feel like I've exiled myself. So afraid that things will not get better, or things will get worse, because I feel like I can't take anymore. Sorry for all this. Don't want to be a burden. Now, like I said at the beginning of this, the important thing to remember is there is hope. So that was September. It's now May. And things have improved so much since then. I'll talk a little bit more about it when we get to treatment, but it really started to turn around in December. you know, definitely thanks for Maggie. She was able to really help me through it. I'll talk about, I got a message back from that, which I'll talk about at the end when it comes to like helping your friends or other people who's dealing with this. Trouble thinking, concentrating, making decisions, remembering things, frequent or recurrent thoughts of death, suicidal thoughts, suicide attempts or suicide, unexplained physical problems such as back pain or headache, which I talked about before. So that's sort of the symptoms of depression. If I haven't mentioned it already, if you suspect that you might be depressed, definitely talk to your doctor. Is treatment the next thing I want to talk about? It is. Good. So when it comes to treatment, let's talk about doctor stuff first. You should definitely talk to a doctor. Ideally, you should also talk to a therapist as well, I think. Sometimes it can be as simple, depression can be caused by vitamin deficiency, a lack of vitamin D. It could be something as simple as that. It doesn't necessarily need to be what I talked about before about getting drained. It could be a medical issue. So you definitely want to rule that out first, I feel like. A therapist, I think, is key as well. And it's just to be able to get those things externalized. I think if you are a neurodivergent person, you are more likely to be depressed. You are more likely to commit suicide. And I feel like a therapist is a must. If you're seeing your doctor at least once a year, you should be seeing a therapist at least once a year as well, I feel like. And it is really tough to find a good therapist. Fortunately, in this age of the internet, there is remote therapy now is the thing. Your options can still be somewhat limited, but that does open up options tremendously. So, doctor. Also, there are antidepressants. So I was first put on antidepressants when I was 11, and it was more for anxiety than it was for depression. But I have gone through severe bouts of depression while being on antidepressant medicine. I'm currently not on antidepressant medicine, and I wasn't on any antidepressants for this past year. I don't want to dissuade anyone from taking them. I think that they can, in certain circumstances, be effective and can be very useful. I think that they work best as sort of a temporary solution. Hopefully depression is something that you are taking the antidepressants in order to deal with the worst of the feelings, because it kind of quashes the feelings down, and then it allows you to recover, and then hopefully being able to get off from them once you've recovered. But this past time, I was trying some different types of medication. Let's see. For depression in particular, I guess I did get this one is more recent, but a medical marijuana card. I have found that marijuana can help boost mood. It hasn't helped as much for the anxiety as I would like it. And I've been taking it less over the past couple weeks than I had been. But I found that it has helped with some mood things. But there's other non-medicine treatment stuff that I want to make sure to talk about as well. But if anyone has any questions about medication, I'm happy to answer them. I'm trying to think of any other particular medication that I was on specifically for the depression. Because my main concern was treating the anxiety and the panic disorder, because I knew that was heavily contributing and fueling the depression. So I was on some more medication for that, but it wasn't specifically for depression. But that's the medication side of things. So let's talk about some other things that can help. So the first one, and sort of the largest umbrella of everything, is change. I think change can be helpful when it comes to dealing with depression. And it can be change in a number of different factors of life, but it can start as simple as like moving your bed in your bedroom so that when you wake up in the morning, you are not looking at the exact same thing from when you were depressed before. When I was younger and had this, I would find myself sometimes sleeping upside down on the bed. And one of the reasons for that was the window was behind my bed. And I think turning your bed so that you are seeing a window first thing in the morning can also be helpful to sort of remind you that there's a world out there outside of your head. I think that's a big thing, is reminding yourself that a world exists out there other than your own negative thoughts and how you're feeling right now. So one of the epiphanies that I had was, and I guess before I talk about that, I'll talk about another thing that has helped me. So I keep a very detailed journal with a lot of different things in it. A lot of those things that I do are in the campaign journal, which is at rollpunches.com. You can download that journal for free. In fact, let me bring it up here, because it does have some things that I want to talk about of how you can start some of those changes. All right, let's do that, and then do that, and then do that. And there are other, this stuff isn't new. It's a new way of looking at this stuff, but so a gratitude journal I find to be very useful. It's a tough thing to do when you're depressed. Ideally, you start these habits and these tools while you are outside of depression as well, and then you just sort of continue it. But one of the reasons I like doing a gratitude journal, which is just naming 3 things that you are grateful for, is that it forces you to search for them, and it forces you to look outside of yourself for the positive. And it doesn't matter how small those things are. It could be, the taste of my favorite snack. It could be the fact that someone opened the door for me in the day. Like, it could be the fact that I saw a cardinal out in a tree. Like, it could be a very small thing, but you're training your brain in order to look for those. Because, let me come back here. As Claire Weeks says in her book about depression, she says that depression is you, it's not the world. So it's a physical feeling, but it's not the world that is terrible. Depression's an illness, just like influenza. Nature's waiting as readily to cure you from one as the other if you will let it. And the other point was... where is it? I can't find it exactly, but I should highlight it. But it's the idea of there are small things that used to give you happiness before that now are no longer giving you happiness, but you can still continue to expose yourself for them. You might not feel it, but deep down it is recharging your battery, just not to a point where you can feel it, but over time that starts to build up. And so that's one of the reasons in my journal I keep what's called the Torchbearer Journal, which is where I make notes of things that either are or I think will give me some kind of pleasure, something that I will or am enjoying. because when I get depressed, I forget about those things. It seems like I've always been depressed. I can't remember being happy, and all of those things fade. But if I have them written down, I can refer to them. I can continue to expose myself to them until they start doing their job again. And I find a gratitude journal is a good way of doing that. You can go back and you can look at the things that you were grateful for or the things that you had enjoyed, writing that down, and then you can continue to expose yourself. So an example for me was, it wasn't long after I sent that message, I don't think, in September. I want to say it was October. But my first sort of moment of light and my first moment of hope, and it was just a spark, but when you are severely depressed, being reminded that there is something other than depression is a huge step in order to start your recovery. It won't be a light switch where now all of a sudden you are not depressed, but it gives you that bit of hope and you can continue to build towards it, because more likely than not, you will get depressed again after that. And it might only be a moment, and you can't worry about feeling bad again. I'll talk about it as like the biggest thing when it comes to dealing with depression, but it's in some way accepting it. And it's not accepting it in a way of like, well, I'm just depressed now and there's no reason for me to try to make it better. It's not despairing at being depressed, but accepting that in this moment now I am depressed. If I'm depressed tomorrow, that's okay. But I'm going to continue to do and seek out these things that I know can make me better. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. I'm just going to keep on that path. Okay. Let's go back to this. Daily goals. Okay. So in this journal, I have a space where you can set up your goals for the day. And that is one of the most important things that comes from, that goes into treating depression. All right. So I call it, what did I phrase it exactly as? Here we go. So a planned program of healthy occupation. Probably not the best way to phrase it, but it has all the points in it that I want to talk about. So, what can happen when you are depressed is that you want to sit in your bed or you want to sit inside your house and you want to just sort of stew in those feelings. Well, I don't want to say you want to do it, but you were left to stew in those feelings, and that is not recovering. And so by finding ways in order to occupy yourself and to occupy your mind, preferably in healthy ways, and in ways that didn't drain you too much, that got you into the state to begin with, is huge. And so Claire Weeks says, you want to do more than you think you are able, but not too much. And that's something that you just need to experiment with and find that balance, because a depressed mind and an anxious mind is like an engine without oil, and it will burn itself up, and it's constantly churning. And so you need to put things in front of that mind in order for it to work on, so that your body can heal, your energy can rise back up. If you are just joining me, I will be taking questions. I'll probably be taking them towards the end, but please put them down as they come. And so a planned program of it where you don't want to be having to decide every single day, what is it I'm going to do today? You want to make that plan or have someone make that plan for you and stick with it. And that, can be continuing your job, or, if you're a stay-at-home mom or something like that, it can be I need to do these things in order to take care of the house, in order to take care of the kitchen, the kids. But laying that stuff out and sticking to it to the best of your ability is going to be something that can help you heal. And introducing into that schedule as many of those things that used to recharge you as possible, whether that's exercise. And exercise is another one that I think is a good treatment. It's not a cure, but it is something that can recharge you, and it is something that can burn away stress and stressors, which can drain you. So I feel like exercise is a huge component, and that's the main reason I think that in particular that I struggled during this past year is because of anxiety and panic disorder and PTSD and some injuries and surgery. I wasn't able to exercise like I was doing. And so that was one healthy outlet sort of taken from me. But as far as that healthy occupation goes, and going back to the things that I enjoy and the idea of that torchbearer journal. So the moment where I had that flicker of hope was I was looking through my journal and found a video on skipping stones. And I thought that was cool and I should do that at some point. And then forgot about it, got caught up in doing other things. But now that I was depressed, I was looking at it again and I was like, oh, I should try that. And, if nothing else, Evie, my daughter, might have fun doing that, even if I don't. And so we went outside and we were walking from our car to the river. And I saw a bird and I had this thought that like my head was going crazy, like I was having a panic attack from being out of the house because I was going through agoraphobia. And my brain, my body was telling me I was in so much danger, and I was feeling all these very strong emotions. And I looked at the bird and I saw that the bird didn't care. Like the bird was just chilling and he was having a good time. And that caused me to look around more and noticed that the other people around, none of them, there's no indication that the world was in fact on fire, which is what it felt like. And so I was able to find peace in that. I realized that there was a storm in my mind, but the world wasn't a storm. And even though I'm getting beaten by my own storm right now, that's not what the world is, and that's not what this will always be. And so the skipping of stones actually was a fantastic treatment for everything that I was dealing with. One of the treatments for depression in particular is getting outside. As much as I dislike the outdoors, a lack of vitamin D can cause depression. So getting out and getting some sun can help. But, study after study have just found connecting with nature is a great way to help relieve stress and is a good way to help and treat depression. And in particular, for some reason, bodies of water, being near bodies of water has sort of an extra effect over top of just normal nature. My problem is when I walk in nature and I'm depressed or I'm anxious, there's not enough to occupy my mind in order to stop it from churning on itself. So I need some sort of activity. So the skipping of the stones was something that I could focus on and I could try to master. And I could, every single stone is slightly different. So it's a mindfulness technique in order to look at a stone and really examine it and sort of take your thoughts out of your mind and put it into another object, or to carefully consider that other object. And so examining the stone, figuring out exactly how you want to hold it in your hand, which side is the one that needs to impact on the water. And you have a goal of, I want to, I skipped it 5 times last time. This time I want to try to do 6. It's a light exercise as well. You're flicking that thing, and that takes effort. You're outside, you're near a body of water. So highly recommend trying stone skipping if that's something that you have access to or could try. Lost my train of thought. I'm going to drink while I try to come back to where I was. So another treatment is company, being with other people. It's tough for me because I have trouble. I am autistic, and I can have trouble communicating when I'm struggling with anxiety or depression. So it kind of makes me want to not have company, but you still need to find ways to be around other people. And if it's your friends or your family, great. But in her book, Claire Weeks recommends, even going out to eat, like outside, like, at a restaurant or something, just the idea of being around people and seeing that can be helpful in healing. And so try to seek out company. And we'll talk about this with what you can do for someone else who's suffering from depression. But if you are a friend of someone who you think is, seek out company with that friend. Let's see. So we talked about gratitude journal. We talked about small, happy daily experiences. And then the biggest thing, which is detailed in that book up here, I can't see myself right now, is the idea of relaxing towards the depression, which might be a better way of saying accepting it. So, and the same thing is true with intrusive thoughts. If we fear depression or thoughts, or if we despair at depression or thoughts, then they, instead of floating away like we want them to, instead they take root and they grow stronger. And so the key is to accept and relax towards the depression. And so what that looked like for me, and it wasn't very relaxing, let me assure you, but the big turnaround for me was in December. So about 12 months after I started having problems. And I was in bed, and Maggie was with me. And I was having panic attacks and meltdowns, and I knew, like, I was trying to practice accepting all these things, but I just wasn't doing it correctly. And so what I sort of experienced, I want to call it like an id death. That's probably an actual term and probably not what I'm trying to refer to. But the idea of it was, well, like right now I'm having this panic attack. I'm having all these very strong emotions, and I feel like I'm dying. And like I feel like things aren't going to get better, and all these terrible things. And so what Maggie was able to help me be able to do was just to accept all of those things as if they were true, and to just lie there. And it's like, okay, well, then I'm going to lie here and I'm going to die, because that's what it feels like is happening. And so I'm not going to try to do anything to fix this in this moment. I'm not going to distract myself from it. I'm not going to take a medication or something like that. I'm just going to lie here, and whatever these feelings are, I'm going to let them be as strong as possible. I'm going to focus on them, maybe to even make them stronger. And it's a very hard thing to do, and it did feel like dying in a way. But after that happened, I felt such a huge feeling of relief. And a similar thing had happened to me when I had been severely depressed before, around the age of like 17 or something like that. But then I had framed it incorrectly in my mind, I think. So then I was all about fighting depression and fighting anxiety and fighting panic disorder and fighting all of these things. And I was like, well, I felt sort of the same way that I did this past December. But instead, I was like, okay, I'm going to challenge these things and I'm going to fight them and I'm going to go out and do the things that I used to do, even though my brain is telling me that it's going to kill me to do those things, that I'm going to die if I do those things. I don't care. Like, I would rather that kill me than to feel like this anymore. So then I did just go and do those things. That was more of a confrontational. But this past time was more of an acceptance. And because I was able to finally accept and live with those feelings, they started to go away. And they continue to start to go away. And so now it's just about recharging that battery. Okay, and then the last thing I want to talk about before I get to questions. Thank you so much if you have been submitting questions. I'll be getting to those. But I want to talk about what you can do for someone else who is suffering from depression. So the big thing, I think, is reassurance. Because even if they haven't come out and told you, I read before how I had sent a message out, and I obviously talked to Maggie, I talked to my therapist, and hopefully in the future we'll continue to roll with the punches about these things. But I talked about how I felt like a burden, even if they have not come to you and told you that they're feeling like a burden. They probably are. And so I would say the first thing to start with is reassurance. Reassure them that, you can tell that they're hurting and that you want to help them and that they are not being a burden to you. Or that, even if it is being somewhat of a burden to them, you are important enough to them that you want to help them any way you can. And you might not have those tools in order to help them, but just reassuring them that you can be there can help. And so something else you can do if you feel like you're not that person maybe who can help is you can help them get help. You can help them look for a therapist. You can make that appointment for the therapist, for that person. You can find help. You can educate yourself more on depression and about things that can help. Obviously, there's this YouTube channel, but there's tons of information out there. You can buy them a copy of that book, Hope and Help for Your Nerves, or something else. But you can help them get help. We talked before about the idea of company. So trying to be that company for them as much as possible and helping them in order to keep themselves occupied as much as possible. And that can be with company with you, but it can also be maybe asking them to help you do things. They might be struggling to do things in their own life. Maybe you can help them with that. But even being depressed, I found it easier to do things for other people than I found to do things for myself. So letting them, giving them that opportunity to feel like they are of value to you, I think can be something that can be helpful. And it can also be something that occupies their mind in order to allow that to heal itself, I think, is something that can be beneficial. And then getting them outside their home into a healing space as much as possible, which is kind of the same thing, but, inviting them out to skip stones, and if they don't want to come, don't kidnap them, but go to their house and be like, we're going to this place. We're going to do this thing. I think can help. And so I I don't think he will mind. But I wanted to read this message that Eric sent back because it helped me a lot. I had read my message before about how I was feeling extra depressed and a burden. And Eric wrote back, "Sorry, Rick, woke up late, feeling really bad, so taking a COVID test just in case. Brother, we love you and support you. When you need time to fight your battles, you get it. I know if I ever needed time for something like that, you would be there for me too. I know you said these feelings are irrational, but feeling them anyway is rough. Nobody's upset or angry with you. Love to talk more too, but one thing I struggle with is always feeling like I'm intruding on something you'd rather handle privately. So just reaching out like this helps me and encourages me to be more open with you. Work is a work. We can always transition to you being more focused behind the scenes at your own comfort level for however much time you need, whether that's a very extended time or not. You aren't a burden at all to us, but asking for help in carrying but asking for help in carrying one you have on your shoulders is never the wrong answer." So just reaching out, reassuring, really helped me a lot. At the time, this is not Eric's fault or any of the other people that I reached out to, but I didn't want to invite them over because I didn't want to feel like a burden, but I had wished that they had come or called. And so do that with other people in your life who are going through depression. Don't be afraid. I would say reach out to them and just keep reaching out to them. Even if it's like they say that, it's no big deal or anything like that. Just continue to do that and try to keep that connection on your end as much as possible. All right, so I think that is the most of what I wanted to talk about on my end, but I'm sure we're going to have a lot more discussions with questions. I do want to check and see if we've had any donations to this wonderful cause of Vibrant and 988 Suicide Crisis Hotline. Let's see here. Indeed, we've had $20 from Wade. Thank you so much, Wade. We've had $75 from, oh no, am I going to get this wrong? Jafrika Jenkins. Thank you so much, Rick, for talking about your struggles. It's so important to get rid of the stigma around mental health. My story sounds so much like yours. I finally spoke to my doctor after years of struggling, and I'm getting better one day at a time. That's so good to hear. And like I said, it doesn't matter how long you have been dealing with this. There is still hope. For me, it was really a year before it started to get better, and it's still continuing to get better. And this getting better has not been a straight line. Like, there have been some dips, but overall it's been an upward trend. And I know people who have suffered with it for longer than I have, and I know that it is possible to overcome. But just because it's possible doesn't mean that it's easy. But don't lose hope. And then finally, another $10 from Anonymous. Thank you so much. Okay, let's go back, see if we have any questions. So I'm really just going to be dealing with questions about depression and mental health. So if there's another question about something like reactions or something like that, I'm just going to skip over those. But come back to the podcast and ask those, and we will answer. All right, just looking over the Roll with the Punches chat first. Okay, Cool McCool. Called my country's lifeline 6 times in the past 2 weeks. They listen, but only tell me to talk to my general practitioner. Been on medication for over a year. Feels like it's not helping anymore. Well, hopefully there is something else in the things that I had talked about before that can help. I do really recommend Claire Wick's book. She also has audiobooks as well, which are very helpful. She was a doctor and a therapist, and I think her audiobooks are a little better in some cases than she is a writer with her book. Her book still has tremendous information in it, but I think she conveys some of her ideas better speaking them than she did writing them. But yeah, cool. I would say that I know, because it's not like I've discovered new techniques in the last year. I have known, so whenever I go to a new therapist, and this includes the very first time I went to a therapist, but the very first time I went to a therapist, I started, describing what I was feeling, and she diagnosed me with anxiety, and she started talking about anxiety and what it can feel like. Unfortunately, I didn't get diagnosed with autism like I should have, but it felt like such a revelation to feel that other people had been experiencing this as well, and like this was something that was known. It was something I could study because I loved and love studying. But then after that, she asked me how I was dealing with it, and I told her all the different things that I was trying, and she said, "Yeah, you're doing everything right." And then my heart sank, because it's like, well, if I'm doing everything right, then why am I still feeling this way? Turns out I was autistic, which I wasn't doing everything right for that. But I had that experience continued on as I've continued to see therapists about anxiety or depression or whatever. And it's like, well, I know the right things to do, but it's still, knowing them and doing them are separate things, first of all. Doing them the correct way, because I know I need to accept these feelings, but actually doing that takes practice. And things like mindfulness and meditation and journaling are things that you just need to be doing all the time, even when you're feeling well, even when the depression is gone or the anxiety is gone. You just keep that up, because either one, it's going to continue to help you and then you're not going to need it again, or you are going to need it, but you're still practiced at it, because it does just sometimes take time in order to refill those batteries, or it takes time in order for some of those emotions to die down. If it's something like a loss or a death, where that's what drained you. Time can heal many things, but you need to put yourself in the best position to heal during that time, because you can continue to just wear away at yourself instead. Absolutely. Okay. And just talking about it helps too. I talk about it on the internet, but also to family, friends, and therapists. Michael asked if I've ever tried microdosing mushrooms. I have not. I've heard some people have had success for that. It's something that I might try in the future. Cruise, sometimes I think people just wouldn't understand why, because I on paper am doing a lot better than many people my age, grew up in a normal house, okay job. Yeah, so there hasn't been any significant event that warrants these feelings. Yeah, and I'm living proof of that, right? Like, I have what many people would consider to be a dream job. I get to work with my friends. I have a loving wife and a loving child. I have a house. I am not rich, but I do not have too great of financial woes. And that made me feel even more guilty that, like, why am I so depressed? I have all these wonderful things. Like, none of that matters. It's more about what's draining you, where your emotions are going, where your emotions are coming from, how you're recharging yourself, and those things can apply to rich or poor or single or married. Like, don't feel guilty about how you feel, I think is the key takeaway. And yeah, like Darcy says, sometimes it can be chemical. Sometimes the antidepressives can help with that. Sometimes vitamin deficiencies. Absolutely. All right, let's go through Twitch now to see if we can find some things there. Super Doris says, I like the presentation of Inside Out. With panel graying out, you can no longer regulate your emotions. I think that's a good visual metaphor for depression. Absolutely. I am... Okay, good. It does take effort to rebuild connections. Absolutely. But it's worth it. Jazz, I get more irritable and less patient because I'm so busy keeping a mask on my depression while at work. Any more issues or problems that come up and I have to deal with a serious nuisance, I just want to focus on myself and take care of myself. I was taking a handful of sleep aids for months to get to sleep. Yeah. So I definitely understand that. That's something autistics go through a lot, is masking. And whenever you're masking how you're feeling or how or what you are, then that's an incredible drain. I'm kind of two minds. That there is that sort of fake it until you make it thing that I ascribe to for a long time. And I still think it applies to things like confidence. But you can shove your feelings down for a while, but you've got to make sure that you are having outlets for them as well. And hopefully that's, people who are close to you. It can also be journaling or engaging in art. So another thing that I enjoy and is a good treatment for me is writing poetry. One, it helps me process my emotions. I have to think about them carefully in order to word them into a poem. But also, when I'm writing poems, I also write poems about things outside of myself in the world, and it makes me examine the world closer. And the more I do that, the less I am inside of my own mind. So I think poetry and writing, or if I was art or drawing or photography, like something that forces you to pay attention to the world as you're sort of looking for inspiration, I think is tremendous. Quite Country has an excellent point. It's hard to reach out for me when I'm in passive thought stage because it doesn't feel pressing because it's so common. Yeah, so it's like a pressure release valve where you don't want to wait until it's critical, because by then it can do so much damage and it can take so long to recover that it's important to practice these healing techniques all the time, even when you feel well. Absolutely. Jazz saying it's hard to find a therapist. Absolutely. Online, I think, has opened that up some. Trying to find therapists that are like you can help if you're neurodivergent. There are therapists who specialize in that, or therapists who themselves are neurodivergent. Pocacino, I think is how you say it. Not just friends, even strangers can help. I was near a beach's cliff, contemplating jumping when a lady just came up to me and gave me a hug. Yeah, absolutely. When I talked about making connections before, it doesn't need to be a close connection like you're trying to find a boyfriend or a girlfriend or something like that. It can just be talking, to someone on the street, or reaching out to that person. And I find helping others helps me heal. And when I'm looking out to help others, that's another thing that's getting me out of my own mind, because I can look at people and be like, does that person look like they're struggling? Maybe I can help them. So not only are you helping that person, but you're helping yourself as well. And, that's one of the reasons why, even though when you're depressed you can feel like a burden, a lot of the time people want to help you, and it is helping them as much as it's helping you. Rookie with a $50 donation to Vibrant Emotional Health. Thank you, Rick, for sharing your experiences. One negative I've always felt about myself is I'm not very articulate. You've spoken very eloquently. I feel I can borrow some of your metaphors to better communicate my depressive experiences to others. Absolutely. And I feel that that's why art is so important, because it does give people those words and that way to express themselves that maybe they otherwise couldn't. The example about the screen in, I want to say Let It Out. That's not it. The Pixar movie about emotions. Like, I think that movie, even though it doesn't really, I feel like it doesn't really represent what happens in my mind so much, it does give me a method of expression in order to explain it to others who have seen that medium, or I can show it to them and help to explain it. So yeah, take notes of things that do that for you. Read more. Like for me, it's poetry especially. But, read poetry, read fiction, watch movies, and take excerpts of that and then use that to explain how you're feeling to people, either in your own writings or by talking to them. And if you want to share this video with people as well, if you think it could help them be able to explain what's happening and to have the words, then please do that as well. That's why I'm doing this, so that I've have lived my whole life thinking about these things. It's a blessing and a curse having this brain that I have, because it is always working on something, and it can be a bad thing where it's working on anxiety and depression and negative thoughts, and it just grinds and burns. But because have been for my life so invested so much of the time in making myself better, I have read and I have watched and I have studied, and my therapist will often say to me that I'm going to use that when I help other people, or I'm going to direct them to your video. And that's, just a thank you to each and every one of you. Obviously Maggie and Evie, and, not wanting to leave them alone was a big reason why I did not end up committing suicide. And I recommend trying to write down reasons before you are in that state as to like why you should be living. I actually have a video that I want to do on that. But helping other people, thinking I could still do that in some way, and if I wasn't around, I couldn't do that anymore, was a big reason. Was one of the reasons why I think I am still here. And it gives a reason to the suffering. Because if I am suffering, I can better understand it, and maybe I can help people better. And even if I can't help myself, maybe I can help others. I am helping myself. It's working out, but that was a big help. And, I just thought that, if people saw me fail at it, then that might be if people saw me fail at it, that could be the last gust of wind that blew out the last of their flame. That maybe me struggling through those things gave them some amount of hope, and if I gave up on the struggling, then maybe they would too. So that's why we continue to struggle. Rupaz asks if depression can really be cured with medication or if it's just to numb the symptoms. It's a very divisive topic online. So I'm not a doctor, but I do think that antidepressants in particular numb you, but because you are numbed, that can make it easier for you to heal. It's like a sleeping pill in order to get asleep for a while. Ideally, that's not something you want to be taking for the rest of your life, but if you are struggling for sleeping for a bit, that can maybe get you back into the rhythm and can let you recover to the point where you can start sleeping again on your own. And I kind of feel the same way about antidepressants, where they can help you with the worst of the feelings, but they also, you don't get to pick and choose. They can also lower the happiness and the stuff that would be recharging you. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you whether or not you should do it. You need to talk to your doctor. You need to talk to your therapist, psychiatrist. But I do think they do have uses. But I think that there are other ways sometimes to recover as well. But I do think that depression is curable in almost all cases. And even if it's not gone forever, you might become depressed again. I do think there is hope. Jazz, as someone who is also the daughter of a mother who committed suicide, I promise you that to your kid, losing you would be more of a burden than if you stayed. I was barely 19 when she did that, but I definitely still needed her. Thank you for sharing. Jagusov, I've not been outside in days due to my depression/anxiety. You made me decide to try stone skipping after this. Awesome. Let me know how it goes in the comments below, or you can tweet me, X me. I'm Archmaster7 on Twitter. I'm on the Blind Wave Discord as well. You can reach out to me. You can DM me as well. I am not a therapist, but I will get back to you. Just continuing to read through. Credobes question: are the panic attacks related to social anxiety. Mine are not related directly to social anxiety. I'll talk more about anxiety and panic attacks a little bit later. But as much as social situations can be a struggle because of my autism, and when my energy gets so low, I tend to have panic attacks. It kind of relates to it in that way. But it's not so much a relation of I'm anxious about the social interaction, if that makes sense. Which is why before I was diagnosed as autistic, my therapist was so confused and would just give me the generalized anxiety disorder, because I was like, well, yeah, sometimes I have panic attacks while hanging out with friends. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I have it at Walmart. Sometimes I don't. I don't know where this was originally. I think Pachuchinho. End of the day, we're just adults having no idea how to adult. I think that's very true. And I think when people think about or talk about treating someone like a child, I think that's seen as a negative. And I really wish that we could reverse that. Because one, I think you should be treating children with some amount of respect. And I think it should be a lot closer how we treat children versus how we treat adults. Not necessarily in all circumstances, but we are still children inside in a lot of ways. We still, that's a good way to heal, is to look back and remember, or ask your parents what comforted you as a child. That might still comfort you now in some ways. We still, most people, like to be hugged or cuddled in order to be comforted. I play video games to be comforted. I get up and pace around and stim in order to be comforted. So I would try to... People tend to be more understanding of children, I think, than they are of adults. But, ideally, we would be able to take that patience that we feel towards children and also apply that to adults as well. Because, yes, children struggle and seem to have bigger emotions than adults do sometimes. But a lot of times the adults are just keeping that down. And we're still the same in a lot of ways. Weekend's over. If I may ask your thoughts on mental health question for a friend. How can someone with many objectively positive aspects in their life, like a loving family, fulfilling work, still struggle with depression? A friend seems to focus on negative thoughts, feeling unworthy or burdensome. I've heard therapy might sometimes prolong these thoughts due to them continuing to talk about these issues. It's possible that therapy may exacerbate the issue. How can my friend focus on the positives? So I feel like I've covered a lot of that during this stream. Already, but the last bit there of therapy can prolong the thoughts about it. So I think externalizing issues can help to deal with them, because when it comes to depression, when it comes to anxiety, when it comes to a lot of these mental health issues, it's like a broken bone has to be set in order for it to heal. I've got to set these thoughts aside and examine them, because the problem is in here and I can't fix it where the problem is, right? So I can't just wish myself to unthink these negative thoughts. I can't convince myself just by thinking that these thoughts are not true. I need to trick myself, or I need someone else to tell me they're not true, and that means more than what I think, because I'm already thinking these things, and I'm afraid or despairing of those thoughts, so they have stronger roots than any other thoughts that I'm going to be able to pepper them with. Now, over time, I think you can train yourself in order to use those positive thoughts in order to overcome the negative. But it's a lot easier when it's externalized. And that can be via journaling. In my Roll with the Punches campaign journal, I do have a part in there where you can sort of journal and have a conversation with yourself, which is like having a conversation with a therapist in order to deal with these issues. I do think that, yes, it is not good to dwell on those thoughts all the time, and that's why occupation is important, to be able to focus your mind on other things. I think you're right there in that it's absolutely critical in order to heal. But I think that we also need to then replace those negative thoughts with positive ones. And that can be easier with the help of a therapist or with some externalizing. So hopefully that answers that question. Should I accept depression and social anxiety instead of fighting to overcome them? Yes. My doctor phrases it as learn how to dance with yourself, not fight yourself, which I think is tremendous. Claire Weeks talks about it as an ocean's wave. So you don't want to stand in front of the waves. You'll just get knocked back by them. You want to float instead. She talks about floating a lot. Frost Dragon, if you're unable to visit someone with depression, be it long distance or whatever else, would just calling or playing online games with them be helpful? I think it would, yes. There is something grounding. So I have a problem with physical touch because of the autism, with most physical touch. But for most people, physical touch is grounding. So even like putting an arm on someone's shoulder or something like that, looking someone in their eyes, which is another things autistics are not very good at. When you're sort of focusing into someone's eyes, it's hard to be in your own mind, and instead you are sort of looking at that person and thinking about what they might be thinking. So those are some tools that you can lose, but absolutely calling, playing online, and being extra reassuring as you're playing that game and letting them know, like, man, I'm having such a good time with you. Like, I have more fun when I'm playing with you than when I'm playing alone. Like, just don't lie to them, but just be extra reassuring that they mean to you and they contribute to your happiness. How do you deal with dips? Sometimes I feel like when I'm getting better and I've had a bad time, it just feels like a snowball downhill. So it's because you are dreading feeling bad again, right? That dread, that anxiety that you are putting on those feelings, those expectations you are putting on to feel better. And if you're not feeling better, you're failing. That is causing all of that to take root and to grow. So you have to accept the downslides, and you have to understand that it will happen, and you will heal when you heal, as long as you keep working at it, and just never stop working at it. Let's see here. Corey, hey Rick, one thing I struggle with is the fact that I am often being the comforter. I like being there for others. I often put up a mask to be there for others, but more recently I felt vulnerable and I'm scared that I won't be as effective at looking after the ones I care about, especially when I've helped other people in their crisis point. Do you have any advice for helping out my depression in this sort of regard? No pressure, of course, best wishes. So first of all, thank you for supporting your friends and those close to you. That's a tough one. Like, hopefully you would be able to rely on those people that you have helped or other people in your life. Was it a burden for you to help them? Or did, it make you feel good? Did it make you feel valued? They will probably feel the same thing towards you, right? So don't think of it as you were costing them something for them to help you. You are giving them the opportunity to gain something by helping you. That would be, I think, my recommendation. This will be on YouTube, yes. So it's over at Roll with the Punches, ROLE with the Punches is the name of the YouTube channel. I'm streaming there now, but the VOD will be there under the live section. Veronica, I made an appointment to see the dentist today after a very long time. Depression prevented me from taking care of myself. I made a goal to get this done. Still very afraid of the appointment, the possible lecture I might get. I've already lectured myself in my own head, but I need to do this. Maybe it'll kickstart something in my brain. One goal, day at a time. Yes, absolutely. So I didn't talk about this during the treatment method. I should have. I made a note, but we can talk about it now. So the idea that depression tends to hit worst in the mornings, right? You wake up, you're so overwhelmed, you feel like you can't face the day, you can't take on anymore, and you just want to lie there and you want to just stew in how you're feeling. Or you don't want to, but you feel like you're forced to. And so mornings are the most critical time for depression and for starting that occupation that's going to continue on throughout the day. So hopefully the night before, you've planned out your day or your week ahead of time. So you already have stuff that you're going to be doing. And it's not, well, I don't want to do this. It's, this is my job to do these things. Because even when we're depressed, we do tend to be able to push that down and continue to be able to work, right? Like even when I've been very depressed in the past, like there were days when I had to take sick days, but I was still able largely to force myself to go into work because I had to eat, right? But as soon as you wake up, and unless it's, I would say 4 o'clock in the morning or before, and you do have some sleep medication or something that you could take in order to get yourself some more sleep. But after that, get out of bed. The bed is on fire. Okay? As soon as you wake up, that bed is on fire. You've got to get out of it. You can go to the bathroom, you can go and do whatever, but you can't go back. You've got to find your things that can occupy you, because if you sit there and you're on your phone or whatever, you're doom scrolling, like you're not actively doing something, then you're not actively healing, and it's just going to be harder and harder and harder. So and I know it's hard. I know it is, but just wake up and imagine that bed is on fire and that you got to get out. You got to. And maybe get some food in you. Take a shower. I know you don't want to. I know you don't want to take care of yourself. I know you feel like you can't take care of yourself. But just do those little things. Like, I just need to get out of bed. I just need to take a shower. But don't think about the shower until you're out of bed, right? Getting out of bed is the first step and the only step until you're out of bed. And then there's another thing, and then there's another thing. And you can keep taking those little tiny one steps at a time. Don't think about the end of the journey. Just think about each of those individual steps. But you got to get out of bed first thing in the morning. Snowy, Rick, you've helped me so much through my emotional journey. I still get stuck in my brain and my house stuck, but then I get another breakthrough and get even better. It's been a journey, so thank you so much. Thank you, because you've helped me as well. Natasha, my dog has been helpful, forcing me to go outside even on days where I just want to curl up in bed. Yeah. Pets are great for that. Children are good for that as well. And, let a friend know that that's a struggle for you. And maybe they call you in the morning and talk you through getting up in the morning. That could be another way to help someone. Yeah, Dora, I'm glad you liked the text-to-speech. It took a long time, longer than it should have, to get that to work, but I'm pretty happy with it. Dasliva, Rick, do you get the brain zaps at all? I was my worst around the 10th of August, which was my birthday last year. Was getting them constantly. It was torture. Thanks for all of your live streams and vids. Meant the world to me and all of us. Yes, I do get brain zaps. So I've also experienced different brain zaps over time. So coming off the antidepressants were like, once I experienced that, like that is what a brain zap is to me. And that was a terrible and awful experience. That doesn't happen to everyone. And maybe there would have been a way for me to come off it a little smoother than I did, so I didn't have to experience that. But what I think you're talking about is the sort of feeling of electricity in your brain, and then that sort of courses through your body. I have experienced that. Especially, I'd say the past week to week and a half, it's been really, really bad. And I know for me, a lot of that is the autism and having these emotions pent up in my body, and I haven't given them a proper way to release. So like I haven't had a good cry like I've needed, or a meltdown, or exercising is another one for me that helps me get rid of those zaps, or at least mitigate them. But yeah, I would try to watch like a super sad movie and just ugly cry, get those emotions out. I would try exercise. That's helped me before in the past. And then sometimes just time. And like everything else I've talked about, not despairing it, not fearing it, and just accepting it and be like, well, I have the brain zaps. It's going to last however long it lasts, but I'm not going to worry about it. This guy, Craig, thank you for the sub, 16 months. Do we have any more donations? I'm just about to the end of my questions here. Blazkowicz, I've been going through it since April 17th. A longtime friend of 12 years just went missing. No activity on her Twitter, WhatsApp, or PS5. It's really tough and sad as we talked every day. Absolutely no idea if she's even alive. Loved her more than she possibly realized. Keeping myself busy with my other friends, animals, Twitch, YouTube, etc. But it's hurting my heart massively. I feel for you. I've never experienced something like that where I haven't had a closure to a loss. I imagine that is just something incredibly difficult to deal with. But it sounds like you're doing good things in order to heal. And it is something that I think will fade with time. It might never disappear, but can fade. And just know that, she would want your happiness, I think. And so don't feel guilty to allow yourself to feel that happiness. All right. Now that I've got caught up on Twitch, Roll with the Punches has popped off a little bit. See if I can find in here. Can you find humor in depression? So laughter is good medicine. I can still laugh while depressed. It is a good feeling. It doesn't, cure depression all on its own. Just because you're laughing doesn't mean your depression is cured. But I don't think I can find, I can't find humor in my depression while I'm depressed. While I'm outside of it, I can be like, well, that was kind of funny. But in it, no. But, except for, there have been times where I was, particularly in a desperate position and couldn't, find laughter. But that didn't last very long. And one of my go-to videos when nothing else will make me laugh is, I think it's the 90s, maybe early 2000s, but Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the show that was on then, because I know there's a newer one now, but Salem the Cat could make me laugh kind of no matter what. So I do recommend, like I said before, making notes about things that you do enjoy, things that make you laugh, because you will forget what made you laugh when you're super deep in depression. But you can go back to that list and just expose yourself to it. And even if it doesn't, don't despair that it didn't. Just keep trying. Eventually it will. Hey Rick, I have anxiety. It feels so bad for me. Felt a panic attack sometimes, but sometimes those panic attacks are gone. I'm going to be talking more about anxiety next Wednesday. We'll be going into that like we went into depression here. But best anxiety book out there is the one that's on screen now. There have been many books since, but it's largely just regurgitating her ideas, I think. Claire Weeks really nailed it, in my opinion, for a lot of that stuff. Telepathic Lollipop. I find it difficult to use escapism. Sometimes it makes me feel so much better to play a video game. I find it difficult to use escapism. Sometimes it makes me feel so much better to play a video game, get into a movie, etc. But other times it makes me worse when I realize it's not my own life. I felt that as well. Video games are often an escape for me, but sometimes I do find that I'm using them in order to distract myself because I'm not accepting how I'm feeling. So I think that's the thing about occupation, is that there has to be acceptance along with the occupation. You can't use the occupation to distract yourself from the feelings. You have to accept the feelings, then occupy your mind away from them so it can heal. But yeah, when it comes to the escapism, I can feel that as well. But sometimes I will go and I will play particularly sad ones in order to let myself really cry and get those emotions out. And sometimes you just need that release, I think. Thank you for joining this wave. Joining very late, sending much love. I appreciate it. This is on the Roll with the Punches channel, so you can go back and watch the whole thing. I appreciate every message that I get saying that it helps. And do that to people in your life as well. Tell them that they have helped you. That they make you happy. Like, don't assume that they know or that they don't need to hear it. Tell them. Tell them in your life. Tell them online. Like, the more love we can put out there, the better. Okay. Well, I'm starting to lose my voice. I think I've covered most of my points. Frost Dragon, can music help in any way for you? It can. It's just another form of art that is something I can focus on while my mind heals. And it can also be something that I can use to better understand what I'm feeling or to express that feeling to others. I can take music and be like, this is how I feel. Or I can take, a stanza or whatever, and I can use that. There's a really good quote. Let me find it here. See if I can find it. I should have written it down before. Probably won't be able to find it. I'll write it down and maybe bring it next time. But it's the idea of it is, and it's poetry, so it's worded much better than I'm going to be able to word it here. But you can sometimes find glee in suffering because it allows you to be able to better connect to people and to art. So because I have felt this sadness and depression, when I now read these words by this person who was depressed or was talking about depression, I can connect to it so much more than I could before. So even, these terrible feelings have benefits. When it comes to connection, when it comes to helping others, when it comes to better understanding yourself, don't despair at where you are. Know that everything you experience can be a positive, even if it doesn't feel like that right now. Dr. K's video on meditation. Healthy Gamer. I have heard of Healthy Gamer. Yeah, meditation is great. It's definitely something I recommend practicing, and it's another one of those things where it's practice even when you're well. Like, don't stop meditating when you're not depressed or anxious. Keep meditating. We can talk about meditation techniques and stuff in another video, but there's a lot of different ways to do it. It helps you gain a little more control over your thoughts by letting go of that control. All right, well, I think that's going to be it for me for this stream. Thank you so much for joining me. Let me make sure I don't have any additional donations. Jazz Mendra, $10. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to go and do some recovering of my own now. Hopefully this helped you in some way. If you are struggling, if you're in the US, 988, you can dial it, you can text it on your phone. It's a crisis hotline. We're raising money for it this month. Hopefully, wherever you do live in the world, there is someone that you can reach out to. And don't feel like you're a burden for doing so. Imagine if that person came out to you, how happy you would be to help them. They would probably feel the same way about helping you. So, thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. I'm going to be back on Saturday for more mind games. I'll be playing Celeste, the missing J.J. McField, and the Island of Memories, talking about how they relate to and deal with some mental health issues. I'll be picking some more games as well. If you have suggestions, leave them in the comments below or tweet me at Archmaster7, wherever social medias may find you. All right, have a good night, guys. Don't give up hope. Keep rolling with those punches. Thanks, guys. See you next time.